Hello and welcome to Only in Illinois, your weekly recap from Reboot Illinois. I'm Madeline Dubeck here with Matt Dietrich in Springfield. And this week there was some movement in the fight between Governor Bruce Rauner and the AFSCME Local Council 31, which is the biggest union of state employees in Illinois. The Illinois Labor Relations Board, a 5-member panel, voted unanimously not to do what the governor wanted, which was to declare that he was at an impasse with AFSCME before an administrative law judge made a ruling. So what does all this mean, Matt?
Well, back in January, Governor Rauner requested that the Labor Relations Board expedite this process and allow him to bypass the administrative law judge's decision. And what today's ruling means is that Governor Rauner may not have the kind of power that a lot of people, especially a lot of his opponents, people who oppose his turnaround agenda and don't agree with his anti-union stance, that he may not have the kind of power that they thought he had. Now it's likely that we'll wait until there's a ruling from the administrative law judge, which may not come until late in the fall. So basically what it means is the process goes on as it normally would have.
And prior to this decision coming out, the union had been surveying its members and kind of getting them ready for the possibility of a strike.
Right. There had been questionnaires circulating, and this was first publicized on the Capitol Facts blog. And it was basically a questionnaire asking members, would you strike, would you not strike? And this was explained partly by the union as, you know, we need to find out what our members are willing to do and not willing to do. And certainly also this was intended to show kind of a show of force. You know, we've had a lot of shows of union strength here in Springfield, and probably the biggest one was back in May when there was a really big rally on the lawn of the state capitol and throughout downtown Springfield, and that was intended to show the governor that the union had a lot of backing, a lot of members, and that it would exercise its power and it wasn't going to be passive in opposing the governor's approach to the negotiations.
So the process will go on as it normally does, which probably takes out an appeal option if something unusual had happened in this process and the board had moved ahead of the judge.
Well, I think that one of the theories regarding today's decision is that if the board would have allowed this to bypass the administrative law judge's decision, and then later on, if ultimately the entire process went against AFSCME, in other words, if the administration's last best contract offer was then forced onto AFSCME eventually down the road, that AFSCME could bring this up in its appeal. It could say that this didn't go through the normal channel. The administrative law judge should have been allowed to make a recommendation. So from that perspective, maybe today's decision shouldn't be all that surprising. It keeps the flow intact.
And while some people thought that the governor had a majority of the members of the Labor Relations Board on his side because he gets to appoint them, back when this all began, his office did point out that most of the board was appointed by his predecessor, Pat Quinn. So in that respect, it shouldn't be surprising either. Now, obviously, if there were to be a strike, it would be felt in a lot of different ways around the state. Presumably, any state business you wanted to conduct would become much more difficult, including the Secretary of State's office, which is the first thing everyone thinks of. Is that right, Matt? Are they AFSCME employees?
Yeah, AFSCME has about 38,000 state employees as members, And I think about maybe a quarter of that number are considered security, public safety type jobs. They're forbidden from striking. That would be correctional officers, for example.
Prisons,
our
at the
members.
prisons. I think it's about 10,000 of
Okay.
the 38,000.
Right, and the rest are in mostly a lot of what you mentioned, Madeline, Secretary of State jobs. In other words, jobs that the public might interact with, and especially when you're talking about driver's license facilities, that would be a major disruption. Now, AFSCME has said all along that it believes that Governor Rauner, ever since taking office, has wanted to force a strike so that he can then lock out the workers and essentially do what Ronald Reagan did back in 1980 to the air traffic controllers. So what this means is we're not going to see whether that happens in the immediate future, in the next few weeks. It looks like that's going to be pushed off into the fall.
And if you, some people might be thinking about this and wondering why they should care if, we had a budget impasse here for more than a year and a lot of people didn't feel it. But this is one of the, if not the biggest, it probably is the biggest cost driver of government because it's the biggest employee union, and labor costs, whether you're in private business or public business, tend to be the number one cost in any sort of operation, public or private. So the whole outcome of this case is really going to affect every taxpayer.
Right, and I think when Bruce Rauner was elected, you can talk about the way that he's handled the budget standoff, but one of the governor's main duties is to negotiate the labor contract with all of the employees that fall under the executive branch. And we've said this on rebootillinois.com as well, when there was a bill last summer and throughout the fall where the General Assembly was essentially trying to take a lot of Governor Rauner's power away from him. We had said that this is the one duty that the governor has and that he should be able to execute. So, you can argue that maybe some voters might have buyer's remorse over electing Governor Rauner because of the budget standoff and everything, but I think it should have been clear to everyone that dealing directly on this contract was going to be this governor's biggest responsibility. So, in that sense, this is probably the biggest test that we've seen so far of how much power is Governor Rauner going to have, how effective is he going to be able to be. This contract is going to be a measure of that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next edition of Only in Illinois.